Shira, you mentioned a couple of the names here in New Hampshire. Let's shift to that much talked about or anticipated U.S. Senate race with outgoing Senator Judd Gregg. Paul Hodes, our 2nd district congressman, already in as the Democrat. It appears he's going to be kind of the lone big Democrat for that nomination race. On the Republican side, former Attorney General Kelly Ayotte, former gubernatorial congressional candidate Ovid LaMontagne, 2 names who seriously are exploring. A couple other business people in New Hampshire said they may run. What's the takedown in Washington on that New Hampshire race?
Wow. Well, first of all, on the Democratic side, we've seen Paul Hodes. He's been in this race. He declared his candidacy, we're almost coming up on a year now. He got in the race pretty soon after last cycle. So nothing's really changed there. And his job right now is to shut up and fundraise. He needs to raise as much money as he can, more than he's ever raised for a House race, and more than maybe he's even he's been able to do in past House races. That's his job. He just needs to shut up, get on the phone, and raise money. And we'll see in the next couple of days just how well he's going to do. There's a huge finance deadline coming up in the next couple of days. We'll see if he's really raised a lot of money. Now, with the Republican side, it's a whole different story. We saw Washington Republicans so excited about Kelly Ayotte. They were even borderline smug about the fact they recruited a woman who previously said she was not interested to run for the seat, and public polls showed her defeating Paul Hodes in a general election matchup. Republicans down here were so excited about her. She was coming to the Capitol. She was meeting everyone. She was talking with Olympia Snowe. She was really courted heavily. Since that time, since she's announced her exploratory committee, she's come back to Washington several times. But those of us who've been following the race more closely have seen that she's done anything but clear the field for her candidacy. We've seen several candidates get into the race, and it's quite interesting to see what kind of candidates they are and how they're going to affect this primary, which, by the way, is not until next August, as you know.
Sorry to believe, yeah, I know, but it's going to be a fast year because it is a wide open picture. From a New Hampshire point of view, Shira, yes, there are names out there. Ovid LaMontagne has been sustaining a presence, racial committeeman, but he's been a candidate for Congress. Sean Mahoney, a couple of business people. But in the end, I predict you won't see as many actually run. I think there's a heavy flirtation right now testing the waters. I suspect you're going to see Ovid and Kelly run, but I don't know if you're going to see 3 or 4 or 5 people. I may be wrong.
I think you could very well be right, Jack. Because your state has such a late primary in August, there is huge pressure from the state parties, even from on the activist level, to get people out of the primary before Election Day. A worst-case scenario for Republicans in this situation is to have Kelly Ayotte and Ovid LaMontagne, which, those two would probably be the strongest candidates in the general election, just given their previous name identification. They've held office before. Well, at least Kelly has. The worst-case scenario for Republicans would be for these rather wealthy businessmen, people like Jim Bender, William Binney, Sean Mahoney, to spend a lot of money to raise the negatives, to run a lot of negative advertisements on their two best candidates, and then you go into the general election only 3 months, 2 months even, after the primary, and these candidates are damaged goods when they face Paul Hodes, who's had a very clear path all the way for almost a year and a half at that point.
Well, let me ask you this. Again, you listen to the Shira Toeplitz with Roll Call. Shira, you're a digger. You talk to people up here. You've gotten very savvy on first-in-the-nation politics in New Hampshire. Why do you think it is that Kelly Ayotte has not cleared the field, given her reaction with some of the powers to be in the GOP circles? Why do you think it is that she hasn't been able to do that?
I think it's kind of 2 reasons. First of all, Kelly Ayotte, for all of her popularity that I've seen in the polls in the state, she didn't come up through the GOP activist ranks, which is really the community you need to court if you're going to run for office in New Hampshire. It's something that's very, very unique about New Hampshire, is if you want to run for office, you have to court people at the very activist and grassroots level. You have to earn their approval. You have to spend countless hours in dining rooms and kitchens talking to these people. And she was appointed to this seat, so she's never had to go through this process of courting the activists. So the National Party comes in, and it looks like, oh, we know better than anyone in New Hampshire, which is another way not to win the favor of New Hampshire voters, by the way, is to act like you're smarter than they are. And they came in, and they recruited her to run. So I think it was presumptuous, and a lot of people didn't, a lot of voters didn't like that. And a lot of other candidates who perhaps have the platform or the financial means saw this as an opportunity to go in and do this and go in and give a run. A Senate race only comes around, twice every 6 years,
right.
I think.
Or 100 years. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah,
and of course, in New Hampshire, it's been hard to read former Governor John Sununu, the GOP chairman, and editorial positions of the union leader, who they're really behind. And you also could see a scenario where an Oberlin-Montaigne could do well in a primary and not as well in a general. But as you pointed out, if there's a free-for-all with Republicans and they're beaten up and underfunded, it could help Paul Hodes in the general election. Shira, before I let you go, I thank you for your time. You talked earlier about that recess and what people in Congress heard, and some of the Democratic congressmen actually nervous more than one might think about re-election. Question is, do you think the tides in general, including New Hampshire, where we've been so Democratic lately, have changed with independent voters more towards the middle or not liking what they're seeing with the Democratic majority in Washington? What's your take?
I think so. I think we certainly see the tide change a little bit. We'll know just how big that wave is in another month or two when we see how this health care legislation issue turns out. Just got to give it one more month to see what else the White House puts forth, what else Congress puts forth. Let's see if they actually pass something. Let's give it one more month. But you have seen the tide change. You've seen, you're starting to see these little contests, little special elections, and for Pennsylvania State Senate. And you see Republicans winning in these contests that weren't winning before. You see preliminary polls that show Republicans in a better position to defeat their Democratic opponents than they were 6 months ago. You see the signs.
Wow. Yeah, how quickly the tide can turn. Well, we'll see, Shira, and really appreciate you joining us on New Hampshire today. Before I let you go, because I love talking politics with you, what's your favorite NFL team? Is it the Redskins or the Ravens?
Oh, it's neither. I grew up in Pittsburgh. Go Steelers.
Oh.
Go Steelers. Wow, you talked about my favorite thing besides politics.
Well, what happened? I won't even ask what happened in the last game there. With the Steelers. I won't even get into it.
Oh, my God. Troy has fallen and the steel curtain crumbles. That's all I have to say. Bring back Palomalu. We need them. We really need them. Bring him back.
All right. Shira, before you go, there was one last question I had about. We had a text here from a listener. If the Democrats try and pass health care without any Republican involvement, in other words, with the 60-vote filibuster move in the Senate, is there a potential backfire there for Democrats or not?
Huge backfire potential. It looks like President Obama rams it. He's just run his agenda through, and he will look very liberal. It sets him up in a poor position 4 years from now. And this is a landmark piece of legislation that they're trying to pass. It would be catastrophic if they tried to do that.
Hey, Shira, thank you so much. And Ben, thank you very much, Hill. And Ben Roethlisberger, by the way, your quarterback of your Steelers, is hosting Monday Night Raw and Wrestling. I don't know if you knew that. Thank you, Shira.
I did know that, actually. Mike Tomlin was quoted as having no comment.